My name is Tracy Lermino, and I'm the conference manager at SME working on Rapid Plus TCT and the AeroDep events. I am excited to introduce your next presentation, Designing Digitally, how model-based definition gives engineers finite control over their additive medical devices. So your speakers today are Chris Collins and Matt Shomper. Chris is the founder, executive vice president, and COO of Tangible Solutions. Tangible Solutions is an FDA Registered Contract Manufacturer with 3D printed titanium medical devices as 100% of their business. Chris has a mechanical engineering background with a strength in process development for additive manufacturing, finish machining, and lean manufacturing. In addition, he also serves on multiple advisory boards and committees, advising on development of good manufacturing practices and standards for additive manufacturing in the medical device industry. Matt is an innovative engineering leader with a noted expertise in computational design of biologically advantageous medical implants. Matthew leads the charge on the adoption of advanced modeling programs that augment traditional approaches to medical device design and is on the forefront of additive and material advancement in his field. As Director of Engineering at Tangible, Matt strives to connect with customers and understand their requirements, helping them to drive towards product launch in the shortest possible timeframe. With the dual knowledge of both manufacturing and design and development, he is able to swiftly direct projects through V&V activities and FDA approvals by applying a rigorous understanding of device requirements. So thanks, guys. The floor is yours, and I'll pop back in and help with Q&A at the end.
Thanks, Tracy.
Awesome.
Sure.
All right. Can you hear me, Chris?
Barely, but
All right.
yeah. I can hear you.
All right. Go ahead and share my screen.
I did not know that we were going to get that introduction, but it's nice. I wouldn't have written too much.
So here we go. Can you hear me a little bit better now that I'm talking louder?
Yeah, there you go.
Great. So Chris and I are going to be talking about model-based definition. This is something that especially I think is near and dear to Chris's heart, and especially with a lot of the design tools that we now have, it's even more relevant as more design tools become available and as our processes get better and better. So this presentation is going to be how this model-based definition gives engineers finite control, specifically of additive medical devices. So just a quick itinerary. She already did a speaker introduction, so we'll probably just skip over that and just Chris will tell you about Tangible a little bit. We'll go over what is model-based definition, a brief history of model-based definition as it relates to med devices, and then kind of go through a quick live demo of some features as well as like direct applications. So you'll see some pretty cool photographs of like application of this type of digital noise to the devices in the real world. And then we'll go ahead and I'd like to leave a decent chunk of time for wrap up and questions if we have them. And so I'll let Chris go ahead and chat about Tangible.
Sure. So like Tracy said, I am the founder, chief operating officer of Tangible. Founded the company in 2013 and started out as kind of a 3D printing job shop, service bureau, and eventually found our way into the medical rabbit hole. Ended up pursuing medical only and kind of driving into that as a specialty a handful of years ago, and achieved ISO 13485, ISO 9001, got FDA registered. Now we're doing pretty heavy work in spine. We also make a fair bit of like trauma plates, some medical devices for SI, foot and ankle, hand and wrist, some other extremities as well. And then Tangible as a whole has been 100% titanium medical devices for a number of years now. So that is all we do.
Awesome.
Model-based definition. So Matt told you guys a little bit about what we're going to talk about. So You know, engineers nowadays are all familiar with the 3D definition parametric model of a design that they're crafting to accomplish a certain task. And for a long time now, we've used 3D model-based definition, but only to represent the model as a whole, and still use 2D prints to define inspection criteria and tolerances and things like that for individual components and assemblies. So what we're talking about here is the application of model-based definition to additive manufacturing. So we've done it for a little while now, but the model wasn't necessarily exactly what we would get always, because the contract manufacturer or the entity making the parts was simply using the model as a reference, and then going off the print and doing everything they can in terms of manufacturing operations to get as close to the model as possible. And so that's what we're kind of drive into here, is how we kind of swung away from that a little bit, and then now we're actually driving back into it with the adoption of additive manufacturing in terms of macro and micro features in our parts. So Matt, if you could give me the next slide here. We've talked about DMLM as well as the laser-based process of powder bed fusion, commercialized and really caught traction in the early 2000s. And then you can see the referral to Stryker being one of the companies that lead the charge in terms of implementation of a laser-based process, laser-based powder bed process. And I think everyone knows that their hip cup that they kind of drove forward with, as well as their pliffs and a couple other interbody cages that they first brought onto the market. And it was kind of the first out on the scene in terms of a part with mesh integrated into it to perform the function of like bony ingrowth or cell integration. So, and those parts were actually built using model-based definition as well. So what we're doing is outputting an STL file with the lattice or mesh implemented into the model, and then we slice and write toolpath instructions to the machine and send that to the machine after that. Go ahead and give me the next slide, Matt. And then just why model-based definition, and what we're seeing is the capabilities of additive manufacturing kind of far outweigh the complex nature of like the mesh and highly complex 3D models, because we just didn't have either the computing power or the software power to define models in such a complex manner, because they're just driven by like a sketch that's defined by a certain value, and then like a swept cut or a lofted cut, lofted boss, things like that weren't so computationally heavy. And so now what we're seeing is the implementation of, like, I will call them simple lattice structures from a couple of years ago up to now, into devices that people can refer to a predicate. So they still have a solid frame, they still have the same generic shape, they still carry the same load, they tend to outperform, but also be better in terms of bone graft volume, and then lower global stiffnesses to kind of leverage more biological benefits, as opposed to just being a really stiff, solid piece of metal that has been cut away from a block via subtractive manufacturing. So the big thing to drive home here is that we should intend to always rely on our definition being the model itself, rather than a process-based output. So turning up the laser power on the contract manufacturing side doesn't necessarily accomplish what we want as engineers, though we may want a rougher surface we here at Tangible believe that we should define that in the model very particularly, and we'll find out through a few examples here of how we can do that, and then release those specifications to the contract manufacturer, and they should be able to resolve like rough surfaces and complex lattice structures exactly as the model has been defined. So that's what we say here in this. And then the next slide just shows a small example of a small unit cell, if you want, of a 2D surface that we've applied this macro and micro roughness to. So what you can see as in the progression from left to right are like sinusoidal waves in X and Y with different amplitudes in Z. And then as we progress toward the right down the line, then we decrease minimum feature of size. So what we can do in terms of manufacturing that is as we slice each section of the part, this roughness is now on the outside of the 3D model, and that toolpath is actually scanned by the laser itself at each section. So you're melting the roughness onto the surface that is in the X and Y axis. So we're slicing that normal to the build plane. And then as we progress down the line, we're adding what we'll call micro roughness, where we're adding small amounts of roughness to the macro surface itself. So give me the next slide there, Matt. Lots of examples here. I'm just trying to cruise through them so we can generate some questions. And then there is a little bit of like quantification here. So as we measure the surface, we're comparing the surfaces on the image on the left to a ground gauge block surface as kind of a minimal flatness or surface deviations, and then machine surface right next to that. And then in the lower left, it's our 3D printed surface, and then with digital roughness added. So you can see the amplitude tends to grow, and then high and low spots as well. And then on the right, in terms of precision, where as we progressed on the previous slide, where we're adding macro roughness and then adding micro roughness to the macro, you can see this as an example side by side, where under a microscope, we're saying 150 micron is the circled pore there. The smooth surface is the macro texture, and then we add micro texture to the surface itself, and then zoomed in, you can definitely tell the difference there between the two specimens there. So next slide, we'll talk about just an side-by-side example. This is a cervical cage, so relevant in spine and med device. This is just our Tangible was supplier B here in this instance, and this is kind of driving home our example of model-based definition, because you can get a variance in terms of additive. It's a little bit the wild, wild west still, where not everyone's parameters have converged, not everyone's resolutions are the same, not everyone uses the same layer thicknesses. Now we tend to think of additive as just a tool to get the finished product and manufacture the advanced, complex surfaces and structures. We just use additive as a method to manufacture that in real life. And model-based definition drives that home, where you actually enable yourself as an OEM to jump from manufacturer to manufacturer if you need to, or have multiple sources and receive the same output if you're not relying on process-based outputs when you're talking about things in terms of feature resolution and surface resolution. As you can see here in the pictures, just your side smooth surface resolution, those are defined as smooth surfaces in the 3D model. And they're coming out very different between the three products. And our goal is to resolve as smooth a surface as we possibly can to truly represent the 3D model as intended and as designed by the engineer. One of the things that I say often is, when was the time in which it became okay with engineers to receive not what they define in their specifications or in their models, and to receive multiple different products that are defined as the exact same thing in the print or on the model, but you receive two very different products. And so you can see here in terms of resolution of the lattice, in terms of resolution of the smooth surfaces, in terms of resolution of the part as a whole, that our parts far and away represent the smoothest surfaces, and these are not also finished down the road as well. This is just a preliminary prototype that a previous customer of ours allowed us to use as an example. So in terms of control and model-based definition, this is a great example of why we should use that to set the expectation to be the same across the board. Go to the next example, Matt. I think just one more, and then I might be done.
No, I think you're done.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chris. Now, obviously, Chris gave you some really cool examples of just the kind of what we see, why model-based definition is important. So I kind of want to go through and step through some just real quick live demos. This first one just shows you this red cube right here is an inch square. So I wanted to be able to show you from a definition standpoint how we can define these types of things to be, again, true micro macro. So this first example, if we kind of zoom in here, gives you an idea about, this is just one of many different kind of cellular applications. So you can kind of see here that we've got these macro beads and then this micro roughness added. And we can even step down to kind of an even more ridiculous scale. And I'll go through this in the example, but the idea here is that we're at, plus or minus 5 to 10 microns at this small level. So it's not a problem of definition anymore. It used to be, hey, let's go to the process to get some roughness generated here because there's no possible way we can define this type of roughness. And I didn't do any like scaling magic, right? Oh, I'll just make this really, really big, peaks and valleys, and then just scale this way, way down so it looks fine. This is actually being generated at the true micro, micron level, straight in the software, which now we have these types of tools to be able to utilize this. This just gives you an idea about kind of how you can configure and adjust. So you see here, I've already created this surface that goes from smooth to not. And through the manipulation of these variables, we can say, go ahead and mix along certain. So now I've got, I still have a smooth point, but now I've got a little bit of noise here. And now, I could change that noise limit. We'll take it to 12 millimeters. So now you see here, it's going to encroach more upon my smooth space. And then I can also add in some micro noise as well, where you'll see here that on this tail portion over here, I've now added in this as well. So the ability to combine these types of noise, apply them to the bodies where I intersect to just get this nice square shape. I can also add in a kind of regularly repeating patterned roughness, almost gyroidal in nature, like TPMS-like. So again, the ability to have very finite control of these roughnesses allows engineers to define exactly what they want in the model. And then, of course, per what we can do at Tangible, resolve exactly what they want. So.
Yeah, so Matt, let's compare this to like an application in medical right now. So say like acid treating a surface of an end plate to add or stimulate bone growth for end plate or for bone contacting surfaces in an inner body. So if you're acid treating a standard machined end plate or even an additive end plate and to generate roughness or a textured surface at the micro scale, then you may see process variance or surface variance if you measure in the same spot from part to part, even within the same lot. And when we define this in the model, now even micro textures are seeing the same amplitude in the same position in space from part to part in the same lot and even in different lots.
Yeah, and you're always going to have the process isn't good enough, right? Because there isn't a DMLM process right now that exists at the scale with which we can define. So we have our tools now outpacing what we're able to print, let's say, but technology is only going to get better. And whether it's a multi-layer system or it's, again, the ability to have a new emerging type of technology to make these sort of devices, it's only a matter of time before the technology catches up with what we can make. And so I think that just simply say, well, process isn't good enough, just go with the process to get your roughness, is kind of faulty logic, because you're limiting yourself. So this again just gives you an idea here. This macro scale that we had, large peaks 1.5 millimeter, the small noise is about 200 microns, and then this micro scale had about a 50 micron larger peak and a small noise of about 10 microns. So again, it's kind of unprecedented design at scale, which like Chris said, it hasn't always been the desire of engineers to get exactly what they design. And when did it become okay for us to be okay with somebody just pointing to it and say, it's rough, but that's what bone likes, right? So the process is okay, and basically accept a subpar product. So we're just trying to get the idea out there that there's room for both. There's room for designing processes for special cases, different uses. However, it should not necessarily take precedence over the engineer being able to have this type of mastery over their designs. So
something I didn't touch on for model-based definition is process variance. I know you've got another slide up there too, but is in the analysis of variance. So if you're relying on a process based surface roughness, for example, then you're going to see different amplitudes in the same spot in space on the part. So if you're measuring that part in the same spot, then and you're getting variance in measurement, then you can't necessarily contribute like bone growth results to something that varies or something that's not under an appropriate amount of control. I'll say it that way.
Yeah, these pictures were just a couple more slides that we had of examples. Examples of how you can apply this type of these types of designs to the part. So here we have a kind of a sheet TPMS lattice, TPMS being a kind of a surface-based lattice. And you can see here on the right, we have kind of our minimum surface resolution. It resolved as finely as possible. And then on the left, you see kind of this dusting almost of kind of the micro noise. And again, the second part, we here have this macro micro roughness. And on the right, you see that this is kind of resolved at the finest resolution. You can see the depth that we have. So we're able, again, like Chris said, we're scanning an XY, so we can scan in and get depth. We can get kind of ingrowth porosity to compete with maybe a plasma sprayed surface. And then on the left, you can see we can also do that and combine that with kind of this really fine noise as well, just from an engineering standpoint. So again, really kind of compelling topic. Definitely want to be able to chat or get some questions if we have them. So I'm going to shut up. But thank you a lot to Link3D for putting this on, for giving us the opportunity to chat about it. And of course, there at the bottom, info@tangiblesolutions3d.com. If you have any questions or you want to reach out about a project, we're happy to talk to you.
Well, we do have some questions. You ready? All right. What non-destructive techniques do you use to look at internal surfaces, and how do you make sure the internal surfaces are free of satellites and partially melted particles?
You want to take that, Chris?
That's fine. So the same techniques that we'll use traditionally to detect inclusions or anything like that. So CT scanning is super common analysis technique to view the entire volume and analyze the entire volume of the finished product.
Okay, perfect. All right, next question. Do you think implicit modeling-based packages can help exploit the capabilities of model-based definition techniques?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Ahead,
I mean, I see another question here. What software are we using? So we're using Entopology's platform, and it is an implicit modeling kernel, which some other companies, I think Dendrite is a new one that has an implicit modeling kernel. I think NetFab has like a more implicit way to generate these TPMS type structures now. So it provides, again, we didn't even go into like lattices or different types of structures, but an unprecedented amount of control, not only of the lattice types, but of the applications of these types of digital roughnesses to the parts themselves.
All right. Can you add texturing?
Yeah. I mean, texturing at the macro micro scale, you see there, I mean, I was generating a couple of those features on a pretty powerful computer, but I'm also I just changed some of them on the fly on my laptop. So the idea is here, implicit is math-based. Math-based is generally typically pretty easy. It's not heavy, it doesn't use a ton of RAM. So you're able to kind of generate these and change them on the fly. You saw there, I was able to just manipulate a few variables, see how the surface texturing changed. And it really, the amount of work put in behind it to get something that you want may take a while, but once you have what you need and you can package it up, it really is, it gives you a really good amount of control over the stuff.
Okay, let's see. How can you produce features that are smaller than the spot size of the laser that is typically at 70 microns or so now?
So the spot size, I don't know that you're going to get below the spot size, but the melt pool is often much larger than the spot itself. But I think that people are coming up with some clever techniques from a scanning strategy standpoint, but also an exposure standpoint. I think that Renishaw, they have a feature on their new equipment where you can do like a pulsed exposure instead of a continuous exposure, where they're starting to resolve smaller features that are closer to the spot size itself, rather than having like a spot size that's this big with a melt pool that's this big. If that makes sense. I think
also I've heard of a couple systems in the works that may have even smaller spot sizes. Again, the technology I think will catch up if it makes sense. Obviously, you're not going to want to scan your entire part with a 40 micron beam size, but perhaps a kind of a dual approach where you have a small laser for doing the exterior texturing, if it means that it's for a compelling reason, which I think that the data shows a pretty compelling reason for osteo integration right now, for varying types of surface roughnesses.
Okay, so I don't know if you really got into this, but can designers enter rules and allowables?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we're pretty kind of in the weeds with topology as far as we use that software a lot to demonstrate capabilities to our customers. There are a whole lot of other packages out there, so I'm just kind of speaking to what I know. But topology allows for a pretty good amount of control over those. I mean, I was showing somebody the other day, you can basically write in, I don't know if math nerds know what transfer functions are, but you can kind of take multiple different points along your curve as a transfer function, and then input whatever variables you want, and this structure kind of molds itself. Or you can take kind of FEA data and crush particular lattice and then selectively thicken. It's called relative grading, relatively grade your lattice in response to the stresses. So again, the ability to provide that amount of control, I think, is only going to continue to raise the bar for the medical devices that are in the field, and really change the game. Instead of just, hey, here's a solid chunk of metal, put it in a body. Oh, it didn't work out so good. Oh, I'm sorry. It's strong enough. At least it's strong enough. I think that we're gonna get better and better at how we design them.
Okay, cool. Well, it looks like we are right at the top of the hour. So thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. All right.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy.